This is the second in a series of 3 webinars around the entire topic of unlocking hot revenue. The truth is that we're sat on vast amounts of upside and opportunity. Leads you've already paid for, customers who would willingly come back, opportunities you've missed because you're asking the wrong question. The mistakes that we make in terms of blowing at least a third of all our pipeline because we miss a moment where our buyer is inviting us to a moment of intimacy, and instead we ruin it by ratcheting up the pain, or we feature and function them to death. So my question to you is this, and it's a genuine, heartfelt question, because over the last few years, what I've realized is that almost everything that we want to fix in sales and management and leadership is possible if only you stop and think. So I'm going to throw out the baited hook. What is currently impossible for you and your organization that, if you could make it possible, would completely change the game for you forever? So that's our challenge today. And what I'd like you to do is imagine this. It's 12 months from now. A miracle's happened. Everything has gone according to plan. What's different from today? What's good about that better future that you've been able to create? Because that's what is on offer today. That's what Dan, myself, and Suzanne are promising you. You can design that future. You can make that happen for yourself. However, the danger is that we get sucked into bad thinking, bad beliefs. So the key question that you're really going to have to answer at some point in your career, and I suggest you do it sooner rather than later, is what do you want your career or your business to give you in life? Not just being on the leaderboard or the money. What is it you want your career to fund, to facilitate? What are the experiences that you want to create as a result? The generational wealth, putting your kids through school, going on holiday with them, actually being able to spend some time with them. So if you haven't completed the poll, please do. The reality is, it's not about outworking. It's not about grit. It's not about your ability to be Teflon when it comes to rejection. This is about outthinking the problem. If you listened to last week's session, Dan talked to you about how you can reduce your sales cycle by how much, Dan?
70%. That was the average.
Okay, an average win rate?
26%.
And average lifetime customer value from a win back?
It more than doubled. In the aggregate, 110% for me after thousands of customers. The customer win back benchmark study found that over 40% of the time it more than doubled, and about 45% of the time it doubled. That study in Harvard. I'm hitting this hard because it's really important for people to understand the tremendous value that we're trying to unlock here. And that study in the Harvard Business Review of 40,000 lost customers, that was also about over 110% second time around. So it's a big deal.
Well, it's absolutely enormous. And when you think about the amount of money that we squander, the amount of time that we squander, I remember years ago, I had an epiphany when I was feeling my mortality and I was down to my last 10 pounds in the world and up to my neck in debt, and everything had gone wrong that week. And the realization that I was the problem. I was constantly in the middle of it all. And I was doing stuff that I'd inherited and that I bought from other people, like going cold. If you'd run the mathematics of a cold campaign and you were a CFO or you were an investor and it was your money, you would have an apoplectic fit. I mean, the idea that you have a $1 sorry, a 0.2% success rate at any activity in your business. Imagine being a house builder with those win rates. You'd be out of business pretty damn sharpish. So what we're all about is minimizing effort, not wasting time. And the key is to be a fully integrated human being. Who you are, Monique, is Monique the human being who is present in every single sale, when you're driving, if you play golf or rugby, as a mum. And the reality is that we have these roles, but they are not who we are. Our identity is separate from our roles. And if we don't integrate the two, then what we end up with is a path to self-destruction. So today we're going to look at three fundamental pillars: self-mastery, relationship mastery, and performance mastery. And we're going to look at the world through the eyes and the experience of a buyer. So, Suzanne, tell me this: when you are a buyer, what is it you want from a seller? The only thing that you want from them?
Honesty. I want to be able to trust them.
Okay. Dan?
I want to have certainty that they're going to deliver the value they promised they're going to deliver. They're going to solve my problem as they say they'll solve it.
Cool. Ryan?
Echo that with a measurable return on investment.
Okay. So what we're really looking for, I believe, is only one thing from salespeople. We want to make the right decision. We don't want to make the wrong one. We don't want to make the right decision badly. So what does that mean? Well, it means that, and I've interviewed hundreds of CFOs, heads of purchasing, C-suite investors, and without exception, they all filter important decisions through the following syntax: risk, opportunity cost, and then value. Okay? But the problem I see is that almost every seller insists on leading with credibility. And if you lead with credibility, you're focused on the least important aspect of the buyer's decision. Tell me this. In the chat, I'd love to hear from you. What are you doing that you know drives viable buyers into no decision? Let's take a moment for that. What are you doing to cause your buyers to feel unsafe, perceive you as a risk, anticipate buyer's remorse? Because the one constant in all of our dissatisfying relationships is us. Now, weirdly enough, Einstein said the eighth wonder of the world was compound interest. We're going to talk about that later. But the ninth wonder, I think, is just being human. Our superpowers are our ability to communicate, to cooperate, to co-develop an understanding of the context, the situation, the causes of a situation, and then co-create solutions, commit like adults instead of this parent-child surrogacy that we tend to have, and then choreograph who does what when, so we all end up over the finish line together. And that way we raise all boats. And the challenge here is that we are trying to create a real win-win. A real win-win means that everyone gets their needs met eventually. And they get their needs met without compromise. Now that's tricky. It requires patience. It requires you to step back and to really think, how am I going to find the common ground and build bridges so that people who appear to have opposing interests get their needs satisfied? That's our job as a seller. Interestingly enough, that's identical to being a leader, isn't it? The whole purpose of this is to empower other people to make great decisions well. If we're doing that, then what we're doing is we're creating a fully integrated work-life, not balance, but presence. Being full of energy, having presence, being fully engaged in every moment, whether we're at home with the family, putting the kids to bed, reading them a story, at the swimming pool, at the gym, and not trying to break our necks, trying to just numb to get away from the pain. And at work, being the ally to other people so that they trust you. Well, if you are that integrated, you show up that well, then it empowers you because you develop real influence, not this pastiche weaponized influence that we're taught. We win together with sovereign allies, and the work that we do delivers real, meaningful impact. I mean, who doesn't want to come to work and operate in that kind of environment? So I'm curious, in terms of your thoughts, what can you do to plant the seeds of real empowerment, allyship, empowering other people in your organization to get their needs met, and in turn, get your needs met? If you're going to be fully integrated, one of the questions that came to mind, and it's only a recent development for me, but it was a real epiphany. I think other people may find this valuable too. And the question is this: is it an act of coercion and codependence, or an act of love, to take somebody back to a moment that was especially painful, ideally their most painful, or their most recent painful moment, in order that you can get some money out of them? If you were doing that to a family member, would you consider that to be an act of love or coercion? Well, I fundamentally believe that we should stop using pain for discovery. It's unnecessary. It becomes necessary in the diagnostic phase when we're doing the work. But in order to sell, it's absolutely unnecessary. And it starts with self-mastery. You might be asking the question, well, how can you possibly focus on the right end of the problem if you're not talking about their pain? Well, people don't buy your product or service because they want to move away from the pain. They really want the better future. The pain is definitely a motivating factor, but we have two opposing systems at work in our brain. One is much older than the other, and that is the one to protect, to save us, to keep us from doing ourselves harm. The second one, which came around when we became mammals, that one is all about finding novelty, variety. And those two things are in permanent conflict in your brain. And they are in your buyer's brain as well. Now, on top of you have a lot of baggage and history that you've inherited from your parents, their beliefs. Up until about the age of 6, you were on a permanent recording your parents' scripts, your place in the world, what was permissible and not permissible, what your rights were, what you didn't have a right to. No one in our family ever. Your money script, your perception of how salespeople are. And all of that, if you don't understand how you show up, how can you possibly take the complexity out of the sale? Because, Dan, what was the research that you quoted last time about knowing people in your own family?
Yeah, that was a professor at University of Chicago, and what he found is that people who we think we know, 20% of the time we're right, and people we think we know really, really well, like a spouse or a parent, we're only right 30% of the time. So we're projecting our own, like you were talking about, our own programming from when we were, whatever our programming is, we just project that all over people. And that's why we're so wrong.
Well, it's really interesting because in transactional analysis, a lot of what this methodology is based on, the hypothesis is that your scripting, your values, your beliefs go back 75 years before birth. I was born in 67, which means that it's late 1880s in Malta, which means the 14th century. You know, trying to break away from the magnetism of that scripting has been a life's work. Now, how we show up isn't just about how we feel, but it's how other people receive us and then what they reflect back and how we respond to that, which is why we always start with self-mastery. If you don't understand yourself, it's going to be very difficult to have a good relationship with yourself and therefore with other people. So I'm curious, let's open it up to questions. You know, if you want to talk, just raise your hand and then Suzanne will pick.
This idea of, addressing the whole person. And when you take that time to create the trust, after you've created that trust and after you've delivered the value, the downstream benefits are tremendous. Because they're going to be telling their peers, and who do their peers trust? They trust that person way more than they'll trust a salesperson. So you've got these massive, how many people do the kind of work that you're talking about? It's remarkable. It's worth remarking about, so I think that, that's a huge part of the reason why you take the time to do this hard work up front.
On that note, let's talk about that bottom right-hand circle, the pillar there, performance mastery. Any one of you could win business fast with a simple 9-word email. I can't remember who I need to credit for it, and I'm terribly sorry about that. But it's, Dan, have you solved your problem with X yet? Over 60% of the pipeline that you pay for and generate and qualify ends up in closed loss, no decision, according to about 1.2 million calls that were recorded by Gong, and the data was collated between Gong and Matt Dixon over at Gartner. And Matt was the guy who wrote the Challenger sale. Now, what was really interesting about that is there's this one moment where the buyer hesitates. And we are normally taught to handle that moment by controlling the sale, handling the objection, by ratcheting up the pain, reminding them of their pain, the cost of inaction, or by featuring and functioning them to death and talking about the better future. When a buyer hesitates, it is an invitation to intimacy. It is a moment where they are saying, I do not feel certain. I don't feel safe making this decision yet. And I need you to help me make the right decision. What they don't need is pressure. When you put pressure on a buyer, and again, this is really, really important to understand. I was interviewed Mike Lander, who has bought over $500 million worth of stuff in his career as procurement chief. He said that anything over 50K now has to go over his desk for approval. So you've got three groups. You have the evaluation committee, you have the decision-making committee, and then you have the allocation committee. And if you don't have relationships with all of those people, then chances are somewhere along the line, someone is going to feel unsafe. Now, if they feel unsafe, then what happens is this. Your buyer will start to catastrophize. The brain's response, default response to uncertainty, is the worst case scenario. I mean, can you imagine anything dafter than that, than actually creating that condition? But what buyers do, especially buyers who see 15 salespeople a week and they're used to your terrible technique, what happens then is they say, you know, I'm going to bank that. And then they come back to it later when they are ready to buy. And then they say, you know, now I'm ready, but now I want twice the discount. So putting a buyer under pressure is a terrible idea if you're going to try and do that at the last minute to get them to make a decision to buy. Our challenge is this. Our buyers come in and out at different stages of the buying cycle. And if we are not aware of where they are in their buying journey, chances are we're going to mismatch. Because many people in the buying committee, up to between 12 and 16 now, I'm hearing, well, some will be engaged and some will be disengaged. Some will be just entering. And they're all operating at these different rhythms. And your marketing is only touching them very occasionally at the right time. And the rest of the time, it's just noise and interruption. So what we need to be able to do is cut through the noise. But what most people are doing is they're just putting more effort in, which is just a madness. How many of you are just putting more work in and putting more stuff in at the top of the funnel? Because if you're doing that, you're creating a headache for yourself downstream. Steve, you look like you really wanted to say something then. So the role of the leader is to create an environment where others can be successful. Absolutely, that is our job. Well, interestingly enough, sales is that job too. Empowering other people to make the right decision is leadership. Interestingly enough, we have a moment in history where we can actually make an impact. I mean, tell me this, what are you doing to prepare your customers for what's to come over the next 3-4 years?
I mean, if that's aimed at me, Marcus, we're doing a huge amount of education, you know, just whatever you would call it, whether it's customer events where we're not selling, we're just educating, we're just sharing insight, taking feedback, trying to address some of their worries and concerns, and just provide knowledge, right? The more we can give, I guess the better we can position ourselves as experts, although I hate the phrase trusted advisors in this space. So yeah, just, you know, a very regular outlook on that from our point, especially around all of the AI stuff that's floating around the market.
Well, again, I think customers are inundated with information and they've got this tyranny of choice. Now, think about this. What if we engage with people and we make 3 fundamental changes? So these are your big takeaways from today. The first one is let go of your attachment to your outcome. Be 100% buyer-centric, uncompromisingly so. The moment you put your interest before your buyers, you project a perceived risk. And you win, I win, and I win, you win are identical, at least on the surface, until the end of a tricky quarter. until you have to make payroll or a mortgage payment or the VAT bill. So we need to create the conditions where we trap ourselves to being buyer-centric all the time. If you haven't yet visited it, go to thesellercode.org, all one word. And this is a statement of intent. It's not legally binding, but I drive all of my prospects and my clients to that, because if they're going to work with me, we are going to work to those standards as a minimum. We actually have higher standards than that, but that's a trap for us. We send a buyer safety audit before we meet customers, and we tell them that if we didn't exhibit that quality, they have to score us 0. And if it wasn't perfect, or it wasn't present 100% of the time, they cannot score us a 6. And the purpose of this is to go running looking for bad news. So your 3 things are, the first thing is be buyer-centric, absolutely uncompromisingly, and never sell your reputation or trust for a short-term win. The idea that a manager will ask you to try and put a buyer under pressure to make a decision before they are ready is immoral in my book. The second thing is focus on prospecting for customers for life. You're not prospecting for a transaction. You're not prospecting for a meeting. You're not prospecting for a demo. You're prospecting for someone who you could be doing business with for 10, 20, 30, if you're young enough, 40, 50 years. Zach Seltz says the only way out of his network is in a box. I'm with him 100%. But the reality is, if we are not buyer-centric and we are not long-term focused, then the temptation is to become transactional and focused on selfish self-interest. That makes us a threat. And the third thing, and this is a big leap, is move your focus from the 0 to 6 months prospect that's ready to buy to prospects who will become active in their looking in the next 6 to 36 months. Now, I'm not saying do it in one big fell sweep. I'm not saying, do it in a hurry. I'm saying roll it out slowly. In the next webinar, we're going to be talking about how you can take the 10x that you get from winback, the 10x multiplier that you can add on top using the ally method, and then how to 10x all of that by integrating emotionally intelligent AI, so you can precisely pinpoint, even down to the time of day and the weather and the geography, with 100% get-through rate with emails that cause your prospect to pay attention. Because, for example, the way we're working that is we lead with your competitor's logo as a GIF, and then 5 data points that we know about your competitor that we're happy to share with you. Now, isn't that a much more interesting way of using your existing data than trying to punish them with this mass of emails and cold calls? I'd be curious.
Marcus, and talk about just how effective that GIF is with the logo and with those 3 or 4 slides points.
Well, our partner, a company called Gap in the Matrix, they've developed this through the retail market, so luxury consumer goods. And they were able to get it down to 8,000 data points on a single garment. That level of preference down to an individual. And working with Garrard's, the jewelers, with a $200,000 investment, a $68 million return over 6 months. With another one of our pieces of technology that is part of this bundle, which we're calling the red thread, and it's an ecosystem play, we can map where every cent of revenue comes from, which data source, which lead funnel, which lead magnet, which technology it touches, which functionality of which technology it touches, and which humans it touches on its way to the grave or to the bank. And then we can backtrack where every penny of revenue is spent as well. So you can model where all the fat is in your system, take it out, test it very safely. If it doesn't work, stop it. Once you've tested it, then you scale. So our syntax is really simple. Ask, what is the outcome, the job to be done? What's not working? Stop doing that. What does work? Do more of that. And then once we've tested it, scale that. And the outcome from this is the ability to precisely target exactly the people who are ready to buy now. Now, think about what the implications of that are in 8 months' time. What can you do away with because you're never going cold again? You can remove the entire top of the funnel requirement for all of those data sources like Zoom Info. You can do away with the need for SDRs en masse to be bombarding people, and we can create an apprenticeship so we can pull through the next generation of leaders and sellers. There are too many jobs and not enough salespeople in the entire industry. Because what most salespeople do is they brutalize their customers. They use heavy-handed tactics. And that's really expensive. When you consider how much money is lost when organizations are focused on the wrong end of the problem, before you know it, you could have racked up tens of thousands of dollars in costs of pursuit and got nothing back for it. This act of insanity, look at the mathematics of it, and this is not unusual. You'll all have seen these on Twitter or on LinkedIn, where SDRs are talking about their work. Well, if you do the maths, that's a 0.6% conversion from dial to demo. Assuming a 1 in 3 win rate, which I think is extremely optimistic, that's a 0.2% effectiveness rate. Can anyone tell me how stacking all of those costs on top, plus their salary, by the way, which is between 40 and 90K in the US, and between 17 and 50, 60 in the UK, how can we justify that sort of spend? And I put this into GPT, but that was the prompt. Okay, and I'll rattle through this. This was its response. I'll give you a second or two on a page. Just look at the headlines. It's depressing. And management are complicit in this because they're encouraging people to focus on activity metrics, not on meaningful metrics. If you were to measure seller value contribution per hour, imagine you're on 1.2 million. Over the course of a year, a UK working year is 240 days. That means it's $4,000 a month, $4,000 a day. That's 500 an hour. If you're contributing less than £500 an hour, you're doing lowbrow Gollum activity. Your job is to contribute at least or more than 500 an hour. And that is genie or highbrow activity. And if you can move from doing to delegating to deciding to developing, to designing to developing, and each time you move from one of those compartments, you bring someone else up to take on that role or responsibility, you can 10x the value of two people, the person now supervising and the person executing. And they make career progression and you build succession. How many problems can we eliminate by just outthinking our competition? So we're coming to time. I'm curious, any final thoughts, any questions? Right, okay, so Trevor, that comes back to intent. And this is, I'm so glad that you raised this. Inspect your intent. If your intent is to sell, coerce, manipulate, control, handle, convince, you've just weaponized the show me you know me bit. But our hypothesis, an Irish guy, moved to Sydney, was very successful at HubSpot, moved back to the UK, joined Clary. No network, quite a different market, different set of customers, and working in the mid-market, not the SME. So absolutely no network. 18 months later, he is the #1 salesperson in Clary worldwide. 25% of quota on a PIP, under pressure from her manager. 18 months later, the #1 salesperson in worldwide in the SME space. Because they behave ethically. Their intent was always, always, always to serve. Sells printers to food manufacturers to do date stamps, and his job is to displace incumbent competitors because they all have this product and none of them want it. It's like insurance. Okay, but they have to have it. He has a 67% close rate selling at rate card, and he is 200% ahead of quota. His peers who do the traditional stuff sell to the install base and they're closing 9%. Why? Intent. It's about how you project to the other person's brain. Dan, it looks like you had a question.
Yeah, well, so much of this is all about differentiating yourself. Like, we've got competitors, if they aren't the same as us, they're trying to be the same. They're copying our features or benefits. And, we're just swimming in this bloody red ocean.
Yeah.
And this is to me, this just keeps speaking. We're differentiating. The deeper you go into the ally method, the more you're differentiating yourself. That just hit me.
Absolutely. Then the point is, it's not, I mean, it genuinely is not hard to differentiate. Back in 2010, I had the worst week of my life, I think. I had a phone call from Interpol to let me know that someone that I'd introduced to a lot of people had ripped about 2,500 people off. And that took me by an absolute horror storm. A couple of days later, the flash crash happened. And I panicked because the school fees were coming due. So I tried to take my money out of the fund that I had 100 grand in. And it turns out that was a Ponzi scheme, which had gone to a very expensive Russian bride and quite a few very expensive holidays. But there was a light at the end of the tunnel because my very good client, who used to pay me 15 grand a day, was just about due to pay me their next invoice. And so when his email arrived, a big sigh of relief, only to discover that, being an investment bank, all spending had been stopped. Now, at that moment, I knew that the school fees were never going to be paid. But instead, what I did was I panicked. And my intent was to put my interest before my clients. And I kid you not, there's not been a day gone by since the 24th of February, 2010, where I haven't had a moment, a pang of regret And it wasn't that I lost a client for the last 14 years, which is a crying shame. It was that I betrayed Ray's trust because I panicked because I wasn't prepared. And this ally method came about because of that week, because I vowed never again. This is my 7th recession. Sorry, this is now my 8th recession, but I got wrong-footed on the 7th. And what I've learned over the years is this one truth. Being prepared in advance gives you a huge advantage. And you're prepared in advance by not rehearsing the moment, but by preparing the question and thinking about how you would respond when you're asked that question. All of you and all of the people you work with are going to be faced with moral dilemmas over the next couple of years. You're going to be put under pressure by your bosses or your shareholders to discount and to buy business and to put people under pressure. What are you going to do when that happens? How are you going to respond? What are you going to do? Are you going to say no? Because if you don't, chances are you will sell your reputation down the Swanee. You'll be tempted to lie, to omit, maybe a new product comes out. Do you say to the customer, hang on a second, before you sign that contract, you need to know we're just about to launch the new product in 2 weeks' time? How many of you would do that? Because I don't think that would even come into my mind as a question. But a lot of people would. And I think in this world, in this economy, what you'll have noticed is one thing. If you struggled from about February last year when the market conditions changed, there is a big difference between you and the top 4% performers who did not miss a beat, because they are the most trusted person the people in their network know, whether they work with them, whether they're partners, whether they're customers or suppliers. And that's what the ally method is promising you, that you will become the most trusted person in their network. So when someone asks you, who do you trust most? Your name comes out of their mouth as a reflex. So on the 26th at 4 o'clock, so that would be 11 o'clock Eastern and 8 a.m. Pacific, we're going to be bringing all this together. So imagine selling hot in parallel and compounded and creating a choreographed process so that over the next 2 years, you have 16 ideal customers who can buy everything that you can sell, who are operating at different points in their buying cycle and being engaged and not engaged. So you always have a steady pipeline, and you always enter every single sales period on or ahead of quota. So you never have to put your buyer under pressure. And you can learn to 10x the revenue for 1/20th of the effort. Zach Seltz has been growing companies for the last 35 years, using many of these principles at up to 4,000%. So I asked that question at the beginning, what's currently impossible? Well, let's reframe. Let's make it possible by thinking better. So if you would like to attend the next webinar, by all means do. If you want to talk to either myself or Dan or Suzanne about coaching, about WinBack, then please put your email in the chat. You can do it privately, and we will DM you the deck. And if you'd like to book a time with us, then please do so. If you're going to book a time, we'll also send you a couple of audits that will help us to have a more meaningful and directed conversation. My audit is the selling aptitude test. It's based on the top 4% of salespeople worldwide. No one looks pretty. The idea is to look in the ugly mirror and see what you need to do in order to adopt their behaviors, their habits, their beliefs. And in turn, what you'll get is a framework to deliver pipeline certainty, revenue certainty, instant pipeline. And in the process of doing the win-back exercise, you plug the leaky bucket. Tom Williams reduced their churn rate from 83 to, their retention rate from 83 to 97%. And he had a 90% win-back. Imagine doubling your sales revenues and making another 15% margin for zero cost. That's what's on offer.
And partnerships, you know, there's another force multiplier.
Yeah. When you take win-back into partners, imagine this: 6 partners per channel manager, each of whom has a salesperson who's generating 2 ideal customers a quarter. Do you think you will ever have a pipeline problem, a forecasting problem, a cash flow problem again, if you put the time and effort in to build that mechanism? So you can move from this expensive brute force, which is cold, trying to grow your market through hard work, and you can control the expansion, but you can make it explosive, and you can do it in step changes, yeah, each time. And you can prepare your operations, your customer success, and you align the whole piece. But Suzanne, wasn't it alignment was the biggest problem from the SAT?
Sales and marketing alignment. Yeah, absolutely.
So what percentage said that they didn't have alignment between sales and marketing?
It's only about 30% were saying across both audits were saying
Okay.
that there was alignment.
Okay, so 70% weren't. Are you in that 70%? What can you do this week to engage with the marketing department? More importantly, what can you do to engage with customer success? If you were to get a montage of calls and conversations from customers who are unhappy and who are happy, what do you think you might be able to learn from those recordings? If you in sales, marketing, and customer success all got together and thought, what is it that the customer really wants from us? How can we differentiate in a crowded, competitive market where everyone is uncertain? Sarah, I'm not sure whether you can talk. Sarah Downs and I were talking last week, and she said that in 2008, all the CEOs that she was dealing with had uncertainty in some markets, but certainty in others. Now they have uncertainty in all of them. How many of you have noticed that your pipeline has suddenly just paralyzed and got constipated? Well, you can unlock all of that. You can have 200% more at the bottom of your funnel in 4 months with cash coming in the bank, move to an average of a 1 in 4 close rate at the low end, and create pipeline and revenue certainty. So if you'd like to engage with us, then please do. And if not, then hopefully we'll see you at the next one. Any final questions?
I've got one while other people are typing anything in, Marcus. So you've covered a lot of ground today. What's one step anyone could take right now to get started on this path?
Honestly, do the 9-word email. Go back and ask people, write to people who are in your close, lost, no decision. And it goes, "Dear Bob, have you solved your problem with X yet? Regards, Marcus." That's it. And if they respond, they're volunteering. That's a really good start. Another one, a digital signature swap. If you've got partners that you sell, who you would be comfortable recommending, and they're adjacent and would sell to the same audience that you do, why don't you swap digital signatures? And at the bottom of your signature, have a little note saying, "Monique Goodwin is our partner for X. She's fab. if you've got any questions about X, Y, or Z, then contact her and vice versa. And every time you send out an email, do the same for me. And all of a sudden we've got double the reach.
What about dead lead swaps?
Yeah, I was about to say dead lead swaps. How many of you have got good competitors? Well, why not say, Carl, I know we're not going to be able to do business on this occasion, but on the basis of our conversation, I really reckon you should speak to Dan. He's my closest competitor. And I've got to be honest, it hurts to have to recommend him, but I think he's a better fit than I am. Yeah, I say it slightly differently and far more rudely, but yeah. But I mean, 3 things you can do there, and they are free, they're effortless. Let me show, I'm only going to show it to you. I'm not going to share it because there's real value in it now. So where are we? Here. Okay. Okay. So if you're doing the blue stuff, odds are you got win rates along these lines.
Marcus, can you make it a little bit bigger? It's
Of course.
difficult to read.
Yeah, no problem. There you go. I know you're old, Dan.
It's catching.
It certainly is. Okay, so these are our win rates for cold. Are you doing any of these things? If your win rates are higher, congratulations. Now let's go for warm. Okay. Now, let's have a look at a bit of the hot stuff. One of the things we do with the red thread is we give you a free trial for 30 days to use your own data to prove whether it works or not, to be able to give you the level of precision that I talked to you about earlier. Okay. What else? JVs. How many of you have joint ventures? Systematic referral partners. On average, with my referral partners, I get between 3 and 10, averaging 7 meetings booked in the calendar where someone who is trusted by both sides makes the introduction. Okay. After you've got to know one another, your close rate goes up north of 80, 85, 90%. Now, if you've got 4 of those with an average of 7, that's 28 hot prospects where you've been hand delivered by someone who is known and trusted by both sides and understands what you offer and understands the problem that the customer has. Okay. Starting out in ecosystems, it's a little bit messy, but as you start to get going, you speak to people like Alan Adler, Blake Williams, you know, they have amazing close rates. Tom Matson, he has a weekend where his 300 mastermind members generate over $3 billion in revenue for one another. $3 billion in a weekend. You don't need to do a lot of those weekends to be remarkably productive. So if you take nothing else away from today, be intelligently lazy. Karl von Clausewitz would always hire Prussian officers for that quality or those qualities. Minimum effort, minimum loss of life. Also very good for morale and quite useful to have some resources when you need to apply them. So that's where we're going. That's where we're headed today. Love to hear from any of you. Any thoughts, any final questions, feedback?
I just had a quick question.
Yep.
So you shared like these interesting insights about what are the other ways that have a higher percentage of closing business, but I was actually thinking about this yesterday after our conversation that imagine if there's a new company that goes into the market and it's a startup. So and you said you go if they want to sell, they should go to the places where their prospects congregate. And I was thinking, like, does that mean they go to in-person events, or is there some other strategy that you're thinking about?
In-person events, conferences, online. There are specific influencers that they follow. There are groups and communities. There's LinkedIn special interest groups, on WhatsApp, on Slack, on Pavilion. There are all these different organizations that are typically high challenge, high support groups. And many of those people will be selling to the same people that you do. I love the idea of us working together. We did this a couple of years ago and it kind of fizzled out because of distractions, but we're bringing it back, where we all target the same companies simultaneously. Because let's imagine we all want to get into, I don't know, XYZ software company, and it's in all of our sweet spots. Well, all of us do business as usual, as we normally would, try to get referred in. And then we have a conversation, all armed with the same half a dozen or dozen questions. And then we ask to get referred, because the nature of this discovery process enables us to empower the other person to want to give us confidential information to create moments of intimacy. Now, if we do this effectively, and we each get 3 or 4 meetings, if half a dozen of us do that, that's 24 different perspectives that we've been able to get. We then pull that data together, and then we write to the founder or the CEO, and Jason, we've recently conducted 100 hours of research in your business. Your data and your people are telling us that there's an upside potential of 20 million per month trapped in your business. If you invite my team and I in, we can identify which of the 6 that you can begin, of the 72 that we've identified, which of the 6 that you can begin in the next 90 days that you can afford and have resources that will self-fund the rest. Yeah, because again, it's about creating moments of empowerment and being valuable, because everyone else is trying to pitch a meeting and sell them stuff. We're not. What we're trying to do on every touch is be timely, relevant, and valuable, give them clarity on their reality, empower them to understand what is possible, and more importantly, possible for them, and what simple first step they need to take in order to advance towards it that is low risk or no risk and costs them nothing. Because the way I like to think of it is your customer has just walked through your front door, but there are 12 steps to your staircase, and they're not even on rung 0. And we have to create the conditions where they willingly take the next step, because engagement is one of the most important metrics that almost no one bothers to measure. Is the conversation bilateral, or is it all on broadcast? Are you invading their space, or are they proactively encouraging you to come in? Yeah. Cool, Carl, thank you. And your story last time blew us away. Absolutely fantastic.
It was tremendous.
Yeah. Good stuff. And if any of you want to get in touch, then ping us. And in the meantime, stay safe. Happy selling. Bye-bye.